Good morning. So as always, the world turns. So what's going on this week? Megan and I were talking about the fact that it's a little bit more the same, which we'll continue to see through the end of the year and into January before we maybe see the rates dip. We see demand coming back. We see more listings, all the things that we love to see after the calendar turns. But for right now, we stay hyper-focused on the things that we can control, hyper-focused on the things that can continue to build our success. Well, I had the great pleasure of going and driving down to Colorado Springs yesterday and taught the 2-hour goal-setting workshop. And it was, man, I get lit up every single time. And I've had a couple of agents reach out to me saying, hey, will you come into our group and teach that? And the answer is yes. It is yes, because I think this is the time of year where you can really capitalize on making sure that you own next year. Because I'm going to tell you right now, and I wish it weren't true, but it's going to be true. Next year, we're going to see a lot of transition. We're going to see a hurry up, and then we're going to see a wait. We're going to see some change, and then we're going to see it undo. I'm going to talk about the last 5 days of what's happened in the market, and you're going to see that just in 5 days alone. It was exacerbated activity and then a slowdown and pull back. So that kind of shifting, which eventually will lead to lower rates, which will eventually lead to an economic slowdown, which will eventually lead to us pulling out of this and expansion again, all the things. Right now, stop being driven by the noise and start figuring out what it is that you want to do. What makes you different? What makes you successful? What's going to drive 2023? So here's my quote for the day. Stop letting life's daily emergencies derail the greater vision you cast for your own life. And I said that, and I said it to the group yesterday, and I said, it is so incredibly powerful to stand in your own vision, full of passion, knowing what you want to build and holding on so tight that you're not going to let any of the whirlwinds of the noise of the economy and the lack of listings and the updated listings and the lack of demand. And I had a realtor say, why do I always have buyers in a seller's market and sellers in a buyer's market and all the things? Hold on tight, because this is the perfect time of year to get very clear on what that is for you so that you know going into 2022 who you are and who your peeps are, who your people are that you can continue to network with.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm concerned about what we're looking at going into the beginning of next year, because we're going to be measuring, we look at stats month over month and we look at stats year over year.
Yeah.
And in this report, we look at them week over week and year over year. And the media is going to have a heyday because we're going to see negative appreciation for the first part of next year.
Absolutely.
And so the media is going to go out and they're going to call bubble, and it's going to be a very challenging conversation. So it's more important than ever that you're tuning into our weekly webinar updates so that you guys have the current information at hand. And yes, our market has shifted. We still haven't transitioned to a buyer's market, but buyers do have more negotiating power now than they've had in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
We keep saying that we went from running 120 miles an hour to running the speed limit. And so it's going to feel slower and it's going to feel like transition, but we're truly still not in a buyer's market. And I expect that we're going to see that more return to a normal seasonal cadence, like what we've seen from 2013 through 2019. I'm in the process of getting ready to put together my projections for 2023, and I'm going to exclude the years of COVID because they don't really make sense anymore. Interest rates were at such a low level. Inventory was at such a low level. It was a feeding frenzy for buyer activity during those years. And we're not going to see that same type of pickup at the beginning of 2023 as what we've seen in years past.
Right. And if you don't know that going in, if you haven't had these conversations with yourself, with your team, and then with your sphere, and they see them, they see their home losing value, or they keep thinking the opportunity is going to get better if they continue to wait, it's going to push them right back into that seller buying season.
Definitely.
Yep.
And so let's go ahead and look at what happened this last week. This covers the week of, actually, no, I need to share this one. This covers the week of December 7th through the 13th. So this is just the last week of data. And this report's unique in the sense that I track pending transactions. So I'm actually looking at what is going under contract versus the monthly reports that I put out for attached and detached residential, which is based off more so off of closed transactions for that month. And so that data lags behind by about 45 days, whereas this is the most current information that we can pull up for you guys so that you can better advise your buyers and sellers on what's happening. I'm getting a lot of questions about what projections I have for 2023. And what I'm looking at is the more return to 2013 through 2019, where we see that the target listing month and the target closing month are going to fall more closely in line with this, where our market's really going to start to pop as we get into March, April, and May of next year. And so if you've had those listings that have been on the market that have gotten stale and you don't want to reduce your price anymore, you're not quite sure what to do, it may be time to go ahead and pull that listing from the market now so that you can have your days on market reset in 30 days after being off market, so that days on market go away. And so relisting that, we're probably looking at after Super Bowl weekend when our market really starts to pick up and our sales start to turn really red here, and the odds of selling ends up going up as we get into March, April, and May. And so getting into the market back here again, March, April, and May of next year. And so it's time to really consider whether or not you want to leave your listing on the market through the rest of the holiday period, or if you want to go ahead and pull that from the market going forward. Looking at our strategy sheets for 2022, we ended up having a nice little pop of activity this last weekend. It wasn't so much that we saw pending transactions jump so much, but we're seeing this nice purge of expired and withdrawn transactions. This little red cell here is new listings coming on, and that means that there are fewer new listings that come on. So it's it's not a bad time to list, just based off of fewer levels of competition in the marketplace, but it's not really as much of an indicator as the rest of the blue cells here that go across the very bottom of the report. And so looking at what's happened, our month supply of inventory actually took a dip.
Go back one slide. Look at how different it was at the beginning of this year. Like how on fire this year has been
at the beginning of
our
the year.
Comparisons are going to be skewed.
They're going to be
which is
so
why
skewed,
the first
which
quarter is
is
going to
so
look so wrong.
frustrating. Which is why I'm going to use that comparison of 2013 through 2019 to put together baseline projections. Because we're back to a similar level of inventory as we have seen in the past from 2013 through 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022 were all exceptional and transitional years for us that just don't make sense for us to have that in market. We're going to return to this new sense of normal where we see that pickup as we get into the early spring months. And I really am focusing in on what happened from 2013 through 2019, because it's not going to be a fair comparison to look back and see what happened in 2021. 2021, we had historically low interest rates through the better part of the year. And we ended up having an extended selling season where the market really didn't start to cool off. And it even picked up down here in December last year as we got into the later part of Q4, which was really interesting, versus 2022. Our hard cutoff was really right around Easter weekend, where the market started to pull back and we started to see increased price decreases across the board throughout Metro Denver. But the market really started to shift and change as we ended up getting past Easter weekend this year, when interest rates hit that 7.25 mark.
Right.
But this last week, our month supply of inventory went from 2.1 months worth of inventory down to 1.8 months worth of inventory. So we saw the market actually tighten up this last week. And that's in large part due to these expired and withdrawn transactions being so much more up from where we were 1 year ago. We're starting to see that purge of listings where people are pulling their listings from market in hopes of listing them in the springtime to get a better transaction going at that point. But our month supply of inventory is now down to 1.8, which is back into extreme sellers market territory. It's a lot higher than what it was when we were at the beginning of this year, where we were down to like 0.2, 0.3 months worth of inventory, where we were measuring months of inventory in actual days. And so it's still 1.8 months worth of inventory, and our average daily active count was 5,730. New listings are also coming down, with fewer new listings making their way to market, keeping our inventory low, but we're right at about the levels that we should be at heading into December based off of data from 2013 through 2019. Looking at the odds of selling, they actually went up by 2.6% this last week. And so there was a little pop of activity there. We went from about 42% odds of selling up to a 45.4% odds of selling. And so that takes into account all of the available listings for sale in a given week versus those that go under contract in the same week. And I project that forward for about a 4-week period of time. And that means that if you list a home right now, you've got about a 45.4% chance of it going under contract in the next 30-day period. And so again, we ended up seeing that number go up. So the market is reacting nicely where we're having this kind of little pop of activity that's happening as inventory gets driven down towards the end of the year. That inventory getting driven down towards the end of the year is so critical to how our market shapes up and tees off for going into 2023. We need to lose about another 1,000 to 1,500 listings by the end of the year in order to get us back down to where we have been for 2013 through 2019 headed into January. And so I expect there to be a big purge. There's always a big purge on December 31st of listings that expire at the end of the year. And so I'm hoping to see that big purge and fewer new listings making their way to market, where people are trying to time their listing for market for sale as we go into the spring months.
What would you typically see? So I can understand if somebody pulls their house on the market now. We just decorated for Christmas last weekend. So now we've got Christmas parties and have all the things. And so I'm going to list my home again. I'm saying theoretically, I list my home again in the middle of January. But if I don't take my listing off until the end of December, I've gone through the holidays. When am I putting it back on?
So probably at the end of February, beginning of March. It's after Super Bowl weekend that we tend to see a bigger pickup of activity for our buyers in the marketplace. And so post Super Bowl weekend is typically when I start to see those increases in activity for our buyer pool in our marketplace based off of data from 2013 through 2019. Now, again, 2020, 2021, and 2022 were very different years because we had such low interest rates that the market started earlier in those years than what we had seen in the past. Oftentimes, we end up seeing a pickup of market activity after the last game played by the Denver Broncos. I'm not hopeful for a playoff season this year. And so that means that our market could pick up earlier, but the real big pickup is right after the Super Bowl weekend. Okay. Now, looking at where we are in terms of balance, to create a market and balance where we would have a 6-month supply of inventory, where it would be a fair playing field between buyers and sellers, would be about 18,896 active units available for sale. We only have 30.3% of our inventory required to offset demand right now. So this is what's keeping us insulated from having some sort of bubble burst. There's not the dual trigger effect in place right now where we're oversupplied with properties. We're flush with equity still, even in light of having a shallow year for appreciation in 2022. And job growth is still strong. And so we're not seeing those big layoffs that are going across the board unless you're related to real estate, where there are a lot of companies that are related to real estate who have had to go through and resize their companies. And so again, we're not seeing this big jump in job loss like what we had seen back in the recession of 2008 through 2012. And so again, we're only at 30.3% of balance right now. So we're not looking for a more extreme market correction. Based off of showings last week, we had about 9,142 showings that were set. That meant that you should have been getting about 1.6 shows per property per week. I'm still seeing a lot of people go through and reduce their price after week number 2 or 3. It's patience is key in this market, where cutting the price isn't necessarily the best thing that you can do for those properties to get them under contract. It works, but it's not necessarily the thing that you need to be doing right now, right away. You need to exercise patience because we're only getting about 1.6 shows per property per week, which is down from the 25 shows per property per week that we had earlier this year, where everything was under contract in the first weekend. And so if you didn't get 1.6 shows per property per week on your listings last week, that could be strike one for what you may need to consider a price reduction at that point. Looking at where we were for shows to contracts, we were holding in there at about 13 shows to contract. That came down from the last week where it was about 14.6. So about 13 showings should yield you a contract in some sort. And so again, if you've had a total of 13 showings and no offers, that may be time to consider a price reduction. Strike 3 would be based off of median days on market. We're looking at about 34 median days on market right now. And so if you've been on the market for more than 34 days, that could be strike 3 for you to consider a price reduction at that point. But days on market seems to have stabilized for the last 2 weeks. It'll likely continue to go up as we go into the end of December, as days on market always grow as we get closer to the holiday season, as you can see, looking back historically over the last couple of years, where we end up seeing that those median days on market tend to stretch out. Looking at price reductions actually came down this last week by 5.1%. So we saw fewer units making price reductions as they're going under contract. And so it dropped from about 60% down to 54.1% of everything that went under contract last week made a price reduction. 45.2% made no change at all. They priced it correctly. Interestingly enough, there were still some properties in there that did price increases to get under contract. And so that's an interesting strategy that may work for some. It was only about 5 transactions overall based off of what went under contract last week, but a price increase did happen in a couple of different properties. The price reduction this last week was large. It was an 8% price reduction that got it under contract. That increased by 0.8% from the original price, or it's about a $56,000 average price reduction right now to go under contract. So those sellers that are hanging in there that really want to sell this year are making really drastic price reductions. So again, you have this nice 3-month opportunity right now, this kind of golden window between December, January, and February as a buyer to get something under contract, likely under asking price, before the frenzy picks back up again as we get into March, April, and May. It's not going to be the same frenzy that we've experienced in the last 3 years, but the market's definitely going to tick upwards as we get into March. And so you have a great opportunity to go under contract, probably under asking price with some concessions. Last month, it was 57% of all the properties that closed last month had concessions, and it was about $5,800 was the average concession. And what those concessions were being used towards were points paid down or for seller closing costs. And so it's interesting to see this, but this window of opportunity may not last into 2023 when the market picks up as we get into March, April, and May. So take advantage of it now. If you've got a property that's come on market that you really want to put under contract, I would say go for it, because you've got the ability to get some of those inspection resolution items covered right now, whereas you may not have that opportunity come the springtime when our market traditionally picks back up again. Now, looking at homes for up to $500,000, here's our strategy sheet for 2022. You can see our darkest blue row here was back over Thanksgiving weekend. The market has picked up ever so slightly as we watch inventory drop as we get into the later part of the year. And we're still sitting at about 1.3 months worth of inventory. That was flat from last week. And so we've got about, for every one buyer in the market, they've got about 1.3 homes to choose from. The new listings actually increased this last week by 1.7%, and our average daily active count came down by 2.7%. So we're not seeing quite the same purge of expired and withdrawn transactions for homes that are under $500,000 right now as what we're seeing for homes at higher price points. Pending transactions went up week over week by about 2.2%, but they were still down year over year by about 27.2%. So the market is off. We're having about 20 to 25 to 30% fewer transactions happening this year than what we saw last year. I just had to go through and put together my order projections for next year. And a lot of people that I'm talking to are saying that the transactions are going to be off by about 20% going into next year for pending and closed transactions. And so I based my numbers off of that for trying to put together my projections and my budgeting for next year. And so I'm thinking that next year is going to be a little bit more slow unless interest rates come down. And so based off of what you heard, and I'm sure that you're going to talk about this later, what do you think is going to happen with interest rates next year?
So we're going to talk all about the Fed. We're going to talk about the 10-year, what it's doing, how the 10-year to the 30-year is starting to crunch a little bit. What that means is you can watch the 30-year fixed. I think that we could see the 30-year fixed coming down into that low to mid fives, late spring, early summer. Now it's going to pick up, and the second half of the year is going to be the majority of the volume, right? Because you're still going to have some fear in that first quarter. But I keep flashing back to the MBA estimate of the mortgage originations, which I know isn't sales volumes, but it's tied. So they have a difference between purchase and refinance. And if you strip out refinance and you just look at purchase, it's going to be equal to what it was in 2020. And then we have to go back to 2005. And if I have to go back to 2005, interestingly enough, every year between 2005 and 2020 was lower than where we're expecting 2023 to end up.
Interesting.
So the volume, yes, is 20 to 30% off of last year. But if you plan based on 2020 or even 2019, you're still going to be better than you were the 10 years prior to that.
Yes.
So that's really important to put it into perspective that yes, volume is down compared to last year, but can you re-correct your budget, your marketing spend, and even your marketing efforts to something that you did going into the pandemic, like erase those 2 years.
Yeah, we've got to erase 2020, 2021, and 2022. They were just wonky years in our real estate cycle. And so our return to normal, again, I can't say it enough, it's going to be 2013 through 2019.
Yes.
That's going to be our return to normal. Looking at the odds of selling this last week, it popped up about 2% again this last week. You've got about a 55.4% odds of selling headed into this next 30-day period based off of what went under contract last week and the active inventory. In this market, we only have 20.9% of a balanced market. For this market alone, we'd need to have about 8,000 available listings for sale for us to get into a position where we would see more of a balanced market. We're looking at about 2.4 shows per property per week. So if you're not getting 2.5 showings per property per week, you may not be getting your target listing activity that you need in order to get that home under contract. That could be strike one for making a price reduction. We're still looking at about 13 showings to go under contract. That came down from the last week by about 5.8%, but it's about 13 showings to go under contract right now. So if you've had a total of 13 showings and no offers, you may need to reconsider what's happening with your pricing strategy. We sat at 29 median days on market. At most price points, median days on market didn't go up. And so we've been holding pretty flat for that, but 29 median days on market. So if you've been on the market for about a month, it may be time to consider a price reduction. We saw 50% of homes make price reductions last week that went under contract. And the average price reduction was high at 8.8% or about $42,500 off of that original asking price. Those are really significant price reductions for homes that are under $500,000. Even considering the market that we're still only at 1.8 months worth of inventory, pulling those prices back so significantly is really interesting to see how much those price decreases are coming in at. 500 to $1 million. This is the bulk of our properties. And again, looking at what's happened with our strategy sheets, we ended up warming up just a little bit with a fewer new listings making their way to market and fewer back on markets coming to market. But this is definitely a lot busier than what we saw over Thanksgiving weekend. Our month supply of inventory dropped from 2.3 months worth of inventory down to 2.1 months worth of inventory. So that fell by about 8.4% over this last week. And that's in large part due to fewer new listings making their way to market. That ended up declining by 10.1%. We ended up seeing that expireds and withdrawns were up significantly from where we were 1 year ago. So there's some of that purge of the expired and withdrawn transactions, but our average daily active count was only about 32 to 3,300 average daily active count. That nice dive of active listings is coming into this new year. And we need to lose probably about another 1,000 to about 1,500 homes by the end of the year in order to get us back down to where we would have been from 2013 through 2019.
Total. Not just in this price.
Not just in this price point.
Right.
Total. Looking at the odds of selling increased by about 2.1%, came up to 42.1%. So that's your likelihood of going under contract in the next 30 days. If you put up a listing right now, again, you're going to see those numbers grow as we get into the spring months where the odds of selling will start to go back up again. We're sitting at about 35.1% of a balanced market. And so again, we would need to have about 9,300 available units for sale to go under, to be on the market for us to get to that magical 6-month supply of inventory. We're looking at about 1.3 shows per property per week in this particular market. So if you're not getting your 1.3 showings, it may be time to consider a price reduction. It was 12 showings to go under contract. So the market definitely tightened up and buyers looked at fewer properties this last week to go under contract, but it's about 12 showings to go under contract right now. Median days on market fell. It was 41 this last week and it fell down to 36 median days on market. So we lost 4 average days on market this last week. So that's nice to see that homes are spending a little bit less time on the market, but it's definitely a lot longer than what we experienced during the first part of the year. So again, patience is key. So if you've been on the market for a median of 36 days or longer, maybe time to consider that price reduction. Price reductions are still significant as we get into this $500 to $1 million price point with 60% reducing their price. That was down week over week by about 1%, but it's still very high with nearly 60% of homes reducing their price. Price reductions were at 7.3% or about $54,000 off of the original price to go under contract. From $1 to $1.5 million, we're looking at our strategy sheet here warmed up just a little bit as we continue to have that purge of expired and withdrawn transactions. We dropped down from 5.2 months worth of inventory over Thanksgiving weekend to 2.2 last week, down to 1.9 months worth of inventory. So that's now down below 2 months worth of inventory. Our average daily active count fell by 8.4%, and that's because we have fewer new listings coming to market. We saw our withdrawn and pending transactions coming back up again as we see that purge going into the end of the year and our active inventory really diving off as we get closer towards the end of the year. Our odds of selling ended up going up to 40.1%, which increased week over week by about 2.1%. And so again, with all of those listings that are reducing their prices, trying to get off the books before the end of the year, the odds of selling ended up going up. We only have 21.4% of balance. So this market looks a lot like what we're seeing in the under $500,000 market right now. It's in that $500,000 to $1 million range right now. That's the most interest rate sensitive, that are holding back and are fearful about making a purchase. But we see more cash transactions over $1 million, where it's about 40% of these transactions are cash transactions right now. So they're less concerned about what's happening with interest rates at this point. But we only have 21.4% of the inventory required to offset demand at this point. Looking at shows per week, we ended up going up by 1.6%. We saw 1.4 shows per property per week, and it was 11 showings to go under contract. This number has bounced around a whole bunch, but shows to contract came down by 8.9% over this last week. Median days on market was hanging in there at about 32 median days on market, which is lower than what we're seeing in that $500,000 to $1 million price segment right now. So if you've been on the market for 32 days or longer, it may be time to consider that price reduction. We saw fewer price reductions in this price segment, with only 40.4% of them reducing their price last week to go under contract. 57.4% made no change whatsoever in their price. Price reductions were still relatively large at 8.6%, or about $115,000 off of the original asking price. And so it's not uncommon to see $100,000 price reductions as you get into the $1 to $1.5 million price point, because you need to get it down a whole searching tier to get those people interested in that home. But 8.6% of a price reduction right now. 1.5 to 2 million. Again, this is only 2.8% of our overall market. Looking into next year, when's our strategy or time to list? February, March, and April are the best times to list as we're looking at our strategy sheets going into the beginning of the year. So again, if you've got one of those stale listings, pull it and wait until the weekend after Super Bowl to get that property on the market. Here's our strategy sheet for just this last week. And we had a couple of little red hot spots pop up here where we ended up seeing that days to balance went up, and we ended up seeing fewer new listings and fewer back on markets coming to the market. We're not quite seeing the same dive off of inventory as we are at lower price points for inventory coming off the books, but our average daily active count came down by about 2.2%. And our month supply of inventory had been high for the last 4 weeks, bouncing between 4 and 6.4 months worth of inventory. It's now back down to 2.7 months worth of inventory. We saw a big jump in pending transactions, where it went up by 114.3% just this last week, with 15 units going under contract between 1.5 to 2 million. New listings, interestingly, increased. And so that was up. We had 9 new listings make their way to market between 1.5 to $2 million. I
wonder if there's like more second homes, or, I mean, this is the Denver metro.
This
here,
is
so
Metro Denver. So
any
it's not
mountain
just secondary homes.
No.
It does include conifer, evergreen, and pine. So there could be more out there at higher priced homes, but it's interesting to see some of these properties. The odds of selling week over week went up by 7.8%. So that was a nice little pop of activity there. So if you're putting a listing up this month for the next 4 weeks, we're looking at about a 32.4% odds of selling. In this market, we only have 22.3% of a balanced market. And so again, we're still not looking for a more severe market correction in this particular market. We ended up seeing that showings went up this last week by about 23.5% week over week. And it's up year over year by 91.5% for total showings. So there's a nice little pop of activity where total showings was up to 1.3 total shows per property per week. 15 showings to go under contract. So buyers are looking at a few more homes at higher price points. We sold a couple of listings that have been sitting on the market for a longer period of time. Median days on market was up to 69. And so again, we're looking at just over 2 months on market for what went under contract last week. I won't be surprised if that number comes back down, because we probably had 1 or 2 listings that had been sitting on the market that finally sold from the market. We saw that 46.7% of what went under contract last week had a reduced price. 46.7% had no price reduction. There were 66.7% of them actually increased their price. So that was kind of an interesting number to see. That
I was talking to an agent this week, and she put the house on the market. The buyer, or the sellers, I should say, didn't want to fix anything, right? They wanted to put it on the market, and instead of arguing, I mean, she went obviously and did whatever, had the conversations that she needed to have, but they went on the market. It didn't sell. They agreed to take it off the market, painted it, replace the lighting, replace some of the fixtures, and then put it right back on the market for higher. So I'm just wondering too, if I don't want to say you want to give in to your seller, but if your seller is stuck on something and you have the opportunity to show them that this is what the market is doing, this is what I've been telling you the market is doing, well, let's go ahead and put it out there and then let's take it down. Fix the
Buyers
things that we need to
are
fix.
less interested in projects right now, and they're interested in turnkey. Average price reduction was large this week at 12.3% or $258,000 off the original price. And so again, that's one of the larger sets of price reductions that we've seen for some period of time. About a month ago, we ended up seeing it top out at 13.4%. But if we end up going back to where we were the same month 1 year ago, we're looking at, or the same week 1 year ago, we were looking at about a 14.2% price reduction. So big price reductions in there right now. Lots of questions that we need to try and skip through super quick. And so would it be beneficial to use 2019 comps for pricing listings in 2023? I think that those prices are going to be too low because we're not factoring in the appreciation that you saw in 2020 and 2021. 2022 is probably going to come out to be a wash in terms of what's happening with our active inventory. But looking at how those properties sell, like percent of closed to list price ratios, how long it's going to spend on the market, month supply of inventory is also going to be important to look at for those listings as well. If I have a new listing, when would it be best to list? I'm calling it for after Super Bowl weekend. Beginning of March is probably going to be your best time. If someone is ready to sell and list at the beginning of January, are you suggesting we ask them to wait? And if so, wait until what day? Super Bowl is February 12th, or try and list it right now before the end of December. I think we're going to be pretty quiet through the end of December. And so I wouldn't recommend listing right now. But if you could hold off until Super Bowl weekend, I think that we're going to have better market activity after that. Would the same hold true for 55 plus community relisting after Super Bowl weekend? Yes, I would say so. I think that it's kind of across the board, regardless of the type of community and price, that we're going to see that pick up.
We're going to have a fulfilling prophecy here where there's going to be no active list or no new listings in January. Everybody just needs to wait. Let's all take January off, shall we?
Yep. Should we? What about previous years to 2013 and before 2008? Is that easier than the MLS? Is that earlier than the MLS goes? Any general wisdom on the nature of the Denver market going further into the past? So I'm able to measure back to about 2006 is how far my records go back. So I've got some of the information pre-crash, but that market was significantly different, where we had 36,000 active listings on the market, whereas today we have about 5,700. So going back that far in time doesn't make sense, because our month supply of inventory was up to 6 months worth of inventory going back pre-crash. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. 2013 through 2019, we had similar levels of supply versus demand. And so that's why I'm going to go through and find that information. If you getting questions about where do I get the active inventory, where do I get the slide deck? I'm going to email that out to you if you registered for today. And so I'll be emailing that out probably around 2 o'clock. Volume needs to be turned up, please.
I don't know how we would do that on this side.
Let us know if you're continuing to have problems in hearing us. When do you think that 2023 projections will be presented, in December or January? It's probably going to be the end of January before I can get that information out for next year. 55 and over community. I have buyers in town for the holidays looking now. So you've got somebody out there for that earlier question for that 55 plus community that really wants your listing. So let's see if we can't get you guys connected. What percentage of appreciation would you both project to see in 2023? Around 6% or less than average?
It's going to be lower.
I think it's going to be lower too. I think that we're probably going to come out as a wash in 2023. I don't think that we're going to see positive appreciation. I think overall the market's going to, when we average out the entire year, I think it's going to be flat.
I think it's gonna be a little higher than flat, but I think it's similar. CoreLogic just came out thinking that we're going to see 4%, which I thought was a little bit interesting. We're going to see a lot of projections coming out. I'd be really happy with the 2% that we saw in 2019. I think that it's all going to be stacked in the back. I think we're going to have to recover from the hole that we dig the first quarter. I think the second quarter, we're going to see a lot of volatility. And then the third and fourth quarter, we're going to start to see this new normalization that by 2024, we're going to start to see more of our normal cycles throughout the entire year. Now, a lot of that has to depend on where we go with wages, where we go with inflation, where we go with interest rates, how far Powell takes us, which was a big conversation this week, and what we're going to talk about in the second half, because there was a lot of comments that were made, and I got a lot of texts and phone calls saying, so what just happened? Yeah, that just happened. It was really inconsistent how he started the presentation, some of the notes in the speech, and then how he landed the presentation. So I'm going to show you that, and I'm going to show you what the market did based on his comments so that you're watching those things, and then we'll see the dot plot come out. That hasn't been released yet, but I'm going to give you some of the data points that we're going to see in that and what they're planning on doing with that Fed rate. And the question is, why do you care, right? I mean, I know why I care because I geek out on shit like this, but why do you care? You care because I had a conversation last night where an agent put in an offer and was asking me, so based on the increase in the Fed rate, based on the reaction of the market, what are rates doing? Should I put in the offer today? Should I lock in today? Should I wait until next week? Should I wait until the PCE comes out? I mean, there are conversations that you can have around strategic timing because right now, I just got my 2 boys under contract. So we're buying another house.
Nice.
I'm super excited about this. This is my 24 and 23-year-old, and they're under contract together. So they're going to buy their second home, and they're going to do it alone, which I'm really even more proud of.
Awesome.
Both of them have full-time jobs.
So awesome.
They both have money saved. One of the 2 boys is going to move in as their primary, maybe both of them, and they're going to put 5% down, and they're going to do it themselves. Mom and dad aren't helping. So shout out to Jeremy Kane for finding this Open Door listing, because Open Door, as you know, is struggling, as are some of these iBuyer companies. So those are where kind of the little slivers of opportunity exist. And we were able to negotiate. And so those negotiations, I'm looking at the interest rate today going, I don't care. Like, I really don't. Number one, we're getting a seller credit to buy down the rate, just in case rates don't go any further. I'm hoping that I'll never have to refinance these boys. But number two, if the rates go lower, then we're just going to refinance. And I know with 100% certainty that the largest age group today is 31, and the average or the median age group for the first time home buyer is 34. I know we've got this rat in the snake that's coming through, whether the market turns or not. At some point, they will just get used to the economy that we have, and they're going to start wanting to buy. I mean, they were priced out for 2 years. Now they've been feared out for 6 months. For the love of man, they want to own a home, right?
Yeah, feared out is a good way to put it.
So here we are. We're going to see some of that come back, especially after Super Bowl. If you guys all hold your listings until after Super Bowl, then that's going to tell what the market's going to do. I mean, come on, you guys are making it happen. So if you guys are the market movers that are sitting on this call and you all hold your listings, and then all of a sudden we see this massive pop of inventory happen after the Super Bowl, and then all of a sudden, because you're also listening, the buyers that you've been having sitting on the sidelines are also going to come in because they know the inventory is up. And right about then, we're going to see the interest rates continue to slow down, and that's going to help the buyers with affordability a little bit. And then the prices are going to stabilize, and then maybe they'll just kind of inch back up again. They're certainly not going to do what they did over the last 2 years. But this is all the conversations that you need to be having with your buyers right now, because if they're able, the time is to get to the deal. My gosh, we got a great deal. I'm pretty happy about that. So I'm thinking these 2 boys, part of the investment plan, and my 2 boys at 24 and 23, 5% down on a $525,000 house divided by 2. It's still a lot of money. And they have it. And they're like, but like, your 40-year-old self will thank your 24-year-old self that you bought this home. So just hang in there.
Yes.
Right.
That's great.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go through the economics of what's happening and jump into the Fed. So, stay focused this time of year. Take that time out. So often we don't want to. We get busy with life's emergencies. Stop doing that. Start saying what's important to you and focus in on that. So December 15th, talking about what's happening. First, of course, I've got to do a next big thing plug. I mean, come on. It wouldn't be pre-February 2nd if I didn't. It's going to be after February 2nd when you're going to stop hearing me talk about it. But I just had 2 fantastic interviews this week on our Tuesday Live. I had Marky Lemons on Tuesday Live, and she's from Chicago. She's cursing up a storm. She's just all that and then some. My gosh, I can't wait to get that woman on stage. Valerie Garcia, we sent out in an email form. So we had the Tuesday Live, we had the email. Valerie Garcia, leaning into your weirdo. Right now is not the time to conform and learn what everyone else is learning. Right now is to lean into the things that make you an individual, make you stand out, and find those clients who are attracted to that. Stop being something you're not and start being fully 100% all in on who you are. I talked about the fact that yesterday I was down in Colorado Springs doing the goal setting. And not only did we have a fantastic goal setting session, but they decided that they're going to get a party bus. I'm going to have to find a sponsor for this. And they're going to drive up from Colorado Springs, 30 of them committed to driving up to Colorado Springs to the next big thing.
That's so fun.
And I want
What a fun day.
I said I want to be on the bus, but I don't want to be dropped off in Colorado Springs. So if anybody wants to taxi back or Uber back, you can jump on the party bus. They're not drinking on the way in. I told them that is forbidden. You're drinking on the way back down. So if you live in Colorado Springs, hook up with me. I'll make sure that our team in Colorado Springs, who is crushing it, make sure that you get on the bus, because I cannot wait to have them all roll in. It's just going to be high energy. So let's talk about what happened in the market, because that was fun. No, it wasn't actually. So I mean, here we go. We've had this like relatively flat week. So the PPI came out and it was higher than expected. We talked about that on Friday and I brought it up on the Saturday blog that I send out. And then we got the CPI and it was lower than it was expected. The market moved a little bit for both. Here's the PPI. When it was higher than expected, that index, the 10-year treasury yield moved up, which means our yield moved up. Green usually means go and it usually means good, but in this case, it means higher. And so we saw the yields go up, we saw interest rates go up, and then the CPI, they came down again. And then the Fed, I'm going to show you, they really liked it in the beginning, or I'm sorry, they were waiting and then they didn't like it in the beginning and then they settled in as his messaging changed. So just kind of watching, but we've gone down 100 bips or 1%. So topping out at 4.4 and now landing around 3.4. That's a massive drop. So we might just hang out here through even February. Now we've had 2 really good CPI reports, but inside that CPI report was higher wages, which I'm going to talk about. And that's what the Fed didn't like. And that's what Powell talked about yesterday. So the 30-year fix is kind of doing exactly what the 10-year is. Their spread right now is about 2.75 increment. And so we saw the little lift, the increase in interest rates when the PPI came out, and then we saw a little dip when the CPI came out, and we really just landed right where we started. So, and we even saw that yesterday. We saw the markets at first in the beginning of the day started to rally, then they got super sour, and then our 30-year fix kind of rebounded to where it was. So we're traveling in a very narrow range. So the question is do I lock in now? The answer is yes, if the numbers work. Stop trying to time the market and see what the CPI or the PPI or the PCE or what the Fed is going to do. Do the numbers work? Does it work with your budget, with what you're going to rent it out for, or whatever you're going to do with that home? Lock in a lower price, inspection items repaired, a seller credit to buy down the rate. And then when rates go down, then refinance. This is not locked in forever. So the CPI did come out lower. So it came out and it lowered to 7.1 year over year. That was only up 0.1%. Now it had been estimated that it was going to be up 0.3%. Now this is still an increasing cost. It's just increasing at a slower pace. Remember, the ideal inflation is hovering around 2%. It's not negative. Things won't cost less in the future, not like ever, but it is about this slower roll where wages can keep up and the investment interest that you earn can keep up with the increase in the cost of goods. And somebody asked me this week, what exactly does CPI mean? And think of it as a basket of goods, right? If you go to the grocery store, when they talk about the food index, they're talking about a standard grocery cart full of food that they've been measuring those same items for the last 30 plus years. So the same thing goes with hotels and airfare and travel and gasoline and apparel and all the other things, right? So we're seeing these things and they're just measuring the same basket of goods year over year over year. So that number went up, but shelter costs went. In fact, shelter costs made up a third of the CPI, 40% of the core. That rose 0.6%. So I want to highlight that because they're talking about, and Powell talked about the fact that shelter costs were up. Well, shelter costs, this is that orange line. This is the number that's inside the CPI. It was up 0.6% month over month. But the reality is we're down. The reality is that CPI number has not caught up with reality. And that's one of the things that Powell said later in the talk. He talked about the fact that shelter costs were still high and that we've got to take down shelter costs. Well, later in the conversation, if you watch the whole thing, which I did, I kind of geek out on that. you got to carve out some time. I'm just saying it's a little long, and he goes on, but he went on to say towards the end about the shelter costs that not all of the data has caught up with the CPI yet. So he knows this is happening, yet I still got to control this, and we're not controlling it yet. Inflation is still high. And then, of course, if I look at Case-Shiller and the NAR indexes, we're seeing prices are coming down. We know it. We feel it, the reality of it. In fact, we saw another, well, I'll show you that in a second. We saw another market index where the market is not necessarily in step with Fed Chair Powell. So he also talked about wages. So those are the really two big things. We're talking about the price of shelter, and we're talking about the price or the cost of wages. Now, wages are still high, and I had even talked about that when the CPI first came out. I was telling my team, I was like, I don't really see the market rallying strong on this because, yes, it was higher than expected, but the wage numbers inside were actually back up again. They were actually a little bit higher than they've been the last couple of months. So why are wages going up? We still don't have enough workforce. In fact, Powell had mentioned that we have 4 million less jobs than people. So if this is a thing where, I said that backwards, we have 4 million less workers than jobs. It felt wrong when I said it out loud. You do.
Yeah, it was like,
You're like, really? You know it, but you can't stop it until the end of the sentence. Yeah. So 4 million more jobs than people. And so he talked about this being a concern of his going forward, because realistically, you can't get wages to come down if I don't have enough people. In fact, that's what we're seeing with the jobless claims. We're seeing that employers are holding on to all the workers that they can. This is going to continue to support your home buyers, even though we're going into a recession. And I sent out that email last week, the recession's coming. A couple people were like, well, that was super negative. I'm like, no, come on. We've been in a recession since April. It's time for the rest of everybody to come join the party. Like, we need the recession. We need the economy to slow down so that the interest rates and the cost of everything slows down. But wages are systemic. This is not going to change anytime soon. As long as we don't have enough people to fill the jobs, those employers are going to have to pay more to get them. So, and in fact, it was the first month where wages, the real wages, were actually more than inflation. So he's going to be watching that. He kept talking about that. That was a big thing. So now it's just a matter of the speed by which. Because last month when we were together and we were at Ignite, when the goal setting, and it had dropped it had slowed down to a 0.3% month over month increase. Again, still positive, but it was slowing down. This month it's 0.1. So I brought this chart out, which I showed a month ago. So really dependent on the speed by which this comes back into a normal range will drop the year over year. And the year over year is what Powell is referring to. So he's looking at the 7.1 and saying it's still too high, but it dropped, right? So that's a good thing. And it will continue to do that as long as this number. I mean, if you think of annualizing, say a 1% month over month increase, you're talking about a 1.2. You're actually talking about a lower yearly inflation than even their target. So this is going to bounce around a little bit. Just don't think it's going to just keep dropping down and now we're going to have deflation. It's going to bounce around a little bit, but to see 2 months of the CPI back to back is good news, just for the cost of everything, not just for interest rates. Yes, that's a big thing that we always talk about, but for the cost of everything, the gasoline that you're paying for, the food that you're paying for, the airfare the traveling that you're doing, all the things. So Powell comes out, and there weren't a ton of quotables on this time. He did highlight the housing. He did highlight wages. He talked about the fact that the data hasn't quite caught up. But ultimately, he started it out really he was a Debbie Downer. So I wish there was a painless way to restore price stability. There isn't. So bring on the pain. Let's get it over with. But we know that this is a very different recession for those who have and those who have not. And those who have not are going to feel more of that pain as the cost of everything increases. And those typically are not your home buyers. Those are renters. Now we want to get them over to become home buyers as quickly as possible, because that's where we know their life changes. But in the meantime, buyers are still seeing it. We're still seeing, what'd you say, 40% cash purchases? We're seeing incredible demand at over $1 million.
Incredible demand.
So we're still seeing buyers are active. In fact, we're seeing mortgage purchase applications up. I know we had a great December. Now we had a low November, but if you remember a couple slides ago, that's when October was when the interest rates hit 7.25. So you would expect a slower November. So if you had that and you're seeing a little bit of a pickup as the year's finishing up, well, that is great news. Continue that momentum, stay in contact with your buyers and sellers, talking to them about their plan. Because as soon as you got the plan dialed in and you know what they want, then it's just a matter of that right house coming on. I didn't know that the right house was going to come on. In fact, that open door house has been on the market for 6 months. It dropped $100,000.
Wow.
It dropped $100,000. We weren't even looking at it. And then all of a sudden it dropped again. I'm like, wow, okay, now that actually really makes sense, even with these higher interest rates. So as soon as you get your buyer prepared for next year, right? Like no stress. You don't know what's going to come up, that price reduction that's going to hit that nerve, and they're going to know that's the one. At that price, that's the one. So that's why it's so important to get in front of this and continue these conversations. So he came out, of course, he did what he did and what we all expected him to do. He raised the Fed rate 50 bips. So he raised it 0.5 point. And he also went on to say, we're going to do a quarter the next time and a quarter the next time. But really what he was talking about, this longer period of time. But for right now, we raised it a half. ECB did the same thing, the European Central Bank, and so did Switzerland. We're all kind of trying to tackle this inflation somewhat together. We saw the 10-year Treasury. So we were floating along, waiting for something to happen. He starts talking, holy crap, the markets didn't like that at all. And your stocks didn't like it any more than the bonds did. And then as he talked and as the market absorbed what he said and how he got a little bit softer towards the end of the conversation, the markets just kind of really rallied back to where they were at the beginning of the day. This is just one day.
That's
so
crazy.
It really kind of went
out
right
by
back.
every 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's insane.
Yeah, he really moves markets.
That's crazy.
He moves markets. So that's kind of what happened starting. And then we just kind of ended up at the same place. So the dot plots are not out yet. I went looking for them this morning. They're not out yet. So this is the September dot plot map. And this just shows where they were thinking that the target rate, so the highest rate by which the Fed is going during this cycle, of course, not like forever, but during the cycle, where's the Fed trying to push their Fed rate? So last meeting, in September, they said that they wanted it 4.6. They think like that's the top, that's the target, that's the maximum, right? 17 out of 19 officials this time said we want it to be 5.1. That's when the market shot up. He literally couldn't get it out of his mouth before the market started to shoot up. So 17 of the 19 want to see that kicked up. They want to see it go up to 5.1. In fact, 7 of the 19 said that they wanted over 5.25. So this is a bigger deal. So it's higher for longer. So the idea that they're going to raise it a couple times and then stop, and then even some of the market was predicting that we would see them lower it the second half. He's trying to take that off the table. He's trying to say, I am not going to lower it the second half. We're going to stay here higher and for longer. We're going to do these 25 bips for more meetings, because that's really where you land, right? Because you're talking about, I got to get 100 points. So I got to get, or 100 bips. I got to get 4 more meetings then at a quarter in order to get to that 5.25 rate, or at least 3 more meetings, not the 2 more meetings that we were assuming. Now, every meeting shifts a little. So whether or not this is the be all end all, this is the conversation he's trying to have in order to slow down the rally, slow down the market, and put it into more of that neutral zone, which is what we're seeing, that we're giving a little, we're taking a little, and we're landing where we started, right? So that's what we're going to see a lot of as we go into January. So higher for longer. So Goldman Sachs came out and they're saying, okay, as the Fed's been increasing the Fed rate, they really see that target rate coming back down again. So the markets aren't agreeing with Powell. It doesn't mean the Powell's going to change, and it doesn't mean the markets are going to change. It's just simply saying that the markets were really reading into a lower Fed rate the second half of next year. And based on where the consumer spending goes and based on where the GDP goes, we might end up seeing that. He could, at the very next meeting, turn this around or determine at March that he's done, because the markets are saying that this is going to start coming down. So really quickly, some of his numbers, he sees the GDP pretty much flattening out. They had originally estimated that we were going to land 2022 at 1.7%. Remember, consumer spending is 70% of the GDP. This just measures the activity of the economy. He's expecting it to really kind of continue to slow down at the end of this year and then stay slow into next year. They're expecting unemployment to tick up a little bit. And then the PC and the core, they're saying we're landing the year higher than expected, meaning that's why we're getting the words higher for longer, because we didn't attack it and get quite low enough, which changed his tune at this meeting. So that's the entire reason, because we ended the year higher than he expected earlier in the year. Jobless claims keeps coming down. In fact, it dropped 20,000, which is like the bane of my existence. We just need to see a lot of people go on unemployment so that the spending slows down, so the economy slows down, so the inflation slows down, so the mortgage interest rates slow down. That's not happening yet. Employers, yes, technology, real estate, we are seeing some industries laying off. Those employees are quickly getting new jobs. They're not even going on unemployment. They're getting rehired because we still have this massive lack, 4 million of these. We don't have enough employees for the jobs. Retail sales decreased, but it's still up 6.5%. So month over month, it came down right into the holiday season. So we're going to see where the December numbers roll out. This is November numbers, but coming into the holiday, it ticked down. It's right there. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm. Yep, right. That tiny tick down.
Just barely. I know you got to squint. It's just barely. It's not really moving yet. It went down more than expected. So of course, in fact, we actually are seeing a little bit of a stability in the market because our bond market likes this. It likes the fact that consumers are spending a little bit less. If next month continues to show more of that decreased spending, then we're going to see kind of more of a market rally. Now, a lot of this is in goods. So cars went way down, but still food and beverages, people are going out to eat, drink. I'm going to the restaurants and I'm still seeing they're full, right? So people are still doing the services, they're just not spending it on the goods. Manufacturing is also slowing on both ends. This is New York State and Philadelphia. Mortgage purchase applications have been up for 5 out of the last 6 weeks. So it was up 4% week over week. This is fantastic. We kind of hit the bottom, but I keep going back to the fact that, you know, is it going to go way up? I mean, a lot of the buyers have already come through. They already bought just based on a lower interest rate. We're really looking for more of those buyers, taking us back to 2019, the early part of 20, where buyers are buying because their life is changing. They graduated, they're having a baby, they got divorced, all the things that go back to life, not based on the fact that it's so cheap, I can't afford not to, right? That's no longer going to be the reason. So we're not going to see those extremes. Really quickly, I showed this already last week when NAR put out their profile of home buyers and sellers. This is not the actual tenure. This is the expectation of tenure. I bring this back up again because of the next report that just came out this week. That NAR is saying that people who are buying now, first-time home buyers, expect to be in their home for 18 years. I think it's because it was so brutal.
Wow.
It was so brutal getting in. I'm just going to stay put.
Yeah.
B of A just put out a survey, 70%, I can't say this number high, it's 70% of all the Gen Xers and baby boomers retiring or planning on retiring in the home that they own. And then here's the next one. Gen X and baby boomers account for 70% of the 84.7 million owner-occupied homes. So they account for 70% of the owner-occupied homes, and 70% of them said, I'm not moving, right? Because they just renovated or remodeled the home that they currently live in, adapting them for their lifestyle. This is going to continue to put pressure on inventory. We have to know this. And those would-be sellers aren't selling. They're not going to be buyers. You've got to start getting creative. How are you going to attack 2023 to make some of these, make your business happen? How are you going to look for opportunities? This is one of the opportunities, and then I'm going to land this plane. This is one of the opportunities that we've talked about, the conforming loan limits going up, but this means that you can get a conforming loan 3% down up to a $750,000 house, or 5% up to an $830,000 house.
Wow.
And if you want to go even higher than that, we're doing second loans up to 95%. So if you want to put 5% down on a $1.1 million home, you can do that with a first up to the high balance conforming loan limit, and then a second. So these are the kinds of strategic programs you need to be aligning with a creative lender, where you can actually get buyers who maybe thought that they didn't have the option to get into a home. And then you guys make sure, a little plug for DMAR's Economic Summit, which I get to MC this year, which I'm so excited about. I love this program, but it is on January 13th. If you guys did not get the email, make sure to RSVP. There's the website. And with that, we have just a minute to spare.
We've got 7 questions to go through.
All right, let's go through those. Did I stop sharing?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Call me or give you my number and I will call you. Oh, Susan, Angelina, you guys are connecting.
The 55 plus listing. Awesome.
Yes.
You guys can see all of that, right?
Oh, I
Like,
love
you guys
that.
see the question and answers, or do we
Yes.
need to repeat
So
that?
Angelina says, Susan, give me a call. And Angelina Rivera's got that, the connection. So you guys, I have the 55 plus. What's your take on ARMs given the uncertainty of current interest rates? You know, ARMs are definitely an option. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac don't love them. So the interest rates aren't going to be super fantastic when it comes to the conventional loans. And I don't know. I mean, I think rates will go down to 5.5, but I can do a permanent buy down with a seller credit right now and get into the 5s. Why would I do an ARM? Why don't I just take the money the seller's willing to give me and buy down the rate permanently on a 30-year fixed? And then if the rates go lower, I get to refinance. I don't do ARMs a lot. We have them and we do them, but we do like the sensibility and the security that a 30-year fix, especially when I can use seller credits to buy down.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel the same way about listing a mountain property, specifically Fraser, and waiting until after Super Bowl? Not necessarily, because that's a mountain town. And so you've got peak activity over the holiday season of those people coming in to buy a secondary house. And so I'd say if it's a secondary house in the mountains, I'd probably list it earlier, probably January, when you have people coming up for those holiday weekends. I'm working on buying a flip home. It would be selling in March. How much in price adjustment should I consider from the current comps now?
That's a good question.
And that's a really good question.
I don't know if we'll know until we get to
I won't know.
February.
I won't know. And so it's typically going to be like 1 to 2% higher than where we are right now. By the time that we get into March, I think that we're going to see slower price growth as we get into early next year, but it's not going to be a huge increase over the comps right now. Nicole, how do I sign up for your newsletter?
Shoot me an email. And then we'll be blasting out the same thing right about 2:00. We'll send you guys the PowerPoints and all the information to get on. So
what is the phone number to sign up for text interest rate update?
we'll send that out in the email too.
Awesome.
So check your junks. If you're not getting your email from either Megan or I, because we've been finding some, the brokerages have us going into spam.
Yep.
So check your junk folder, check your spam folder later this
And
afternoon.
add us as a contact into your
Yes.
email and a safe sender so that you're
Yes.
sure to get all of our stuff in our inbox. Can you email us the stat chart you just did showing 70% of owners are not selling? Yes, that'll be sent out a little bit later today. Just a couple of thank yous and we are all wrapped up for the day. You want to take us out, Nicole?
You guys are awesome. I know that this market, it brings up more questions than answers. So keep using Megan and I. We always love, and we banter back and forth as well. So if somebody asks one of us a question and we think the other one's got a better answer, then we tag team. But if you guys have questions or specific scenarios, or you want creative solutions, please, please, please. This is why we do what we do, is to support you and to see your clients at the closing table. And if there's anything we can do from a lending perspective and a title perspective, we really do hope that you'll give Megan Aller a call, Nicole Ruth, myself a call, and we can personally go to work for you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. We're here to help you better advise your buyers and sellers. We hope to see you at our closing tables into the next year. And so we have one update left. Next week,
we are not
the end of the
doing
year.
Christmas to New Year's week.
We're skipping that one. The report will still go out, but we will not be doing the webinar so that we can take that time off to be with our family and friends. So thanks so much for tuning in, guys. We will catch you next week for our last update of the year. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.